Welcome to the Weekly Leader with your host, David Guerra.
Hey, hello, and welcome back to this week's episode of the Weekly Leader, and I am your host, David Guerra. You know the premise. I take one notable event from the past week, I break it down, and I add my leadership spin to it. Next, I take one leadership concept, break it down, and also add my leadership spin to it. So now with that out of the way, let's get started. Alrighty, so this past week in the news, this past week was really all about the weather. First, Hurricane Gaston cleared out of the Atlantic, only to have Hurricane Ian arrive on Florida's Gulf Coast after a brief visit to the Caribbean. And now, as with almost all modern weather events, there is most certainly plenty of notice, plenty of heads up of any impending storm. See, weather forecast and warnings and watches are all based on the information from the buoys out on the ocean, Hurricane Hunter aircraft flying over the storms, Doppler radar, and of course the geosynchronous orbiting weather satellites that's beaming back all those images. And with all of that, some people will heed the warnings and do what needs to be done before the storm arrives. That's a good thing. So thus I have to say kudos. Kudos to the state of Florida, the citizens of Florida, the general public, the private sector, the public sector, and all of those that took the warning seriously and proactively responded to what was already being predicted to be a very major hurricane event. Now, however, far too many did not take the warning, and it turned out to be a liability to the first responders and those that had to stay behind and ride out the storm. Then, of course, comes the media circus known as the weather guys and weather gals. And I call them that because out of some misguided sense of rating seeking, they have to travel from long distances to put themselves and their crews in harm's way. Now, what kind of nonsense is that? I know some of them volunteer for it, but it's still nonsense. The issue here is common sense. Why do these so-called professionals decide it is a great idea to go into harm's way only to be in the way and, of course, get in the way? And yes, they are in the way because the local authorities, they now have to cast an attentive eye on those New Yorkers that travel down to Florida because the audience has to know. We're fine with the radar. Now, will it take one weather person becoming a victim to flying debris or fast-moving water that now needlessly puts the lives of the first responders on the line, all because the weather girl had to, look nice getting her hair wet out in the middle of the storm while doing a live shot in the middle of that major meteorological event? Seriously, where is the common sense in all of this? It's out there somewhere, but where? See, at some point, someone has to ask, is this really necessary? Is it really worth the price that may ultimately have to be paid? These traveling meteorologists can professionally and effectively do the same job outside of the immediate danger zone. Really, they can. Folks, the takeaway here is that no matter what the job is you're doing, if it puts you in harm's way or if it puts others in harm's way, is it right? Should we be doing it? Should it be done? See, sometimes it takes a little self-initiative that while you may want the ratings, while you may want the attention or the notoriety behind broadcasting in the danger zone, is it truly worth it to everyone else that's supporting your careless actions? Is it? No, plain and simple, no. No, it's not. It's not. See, as a former active duty infantryman, I know that when there is one less individual out on the front lines, our minds are a little more at ease in that there is one less individual we have to pay attention to, that we have to be on the lookout for. See, that takes that focus away. So in an already highly volatile situation, especially an unfolding situation like the hurricane, anything that is a distraction or a hindrance to those first responders is just begging for things to go needlessly and horribly wrong. And the same applies to leaders in any situation. Current and future leaders, be aware of your surroundings and be aware of the situations you may needlessly be placing others into. See, leaders are supposed to be looking out for the well-being of those individuals they are responsible for. That's the bottom line. Leaders, if you are not looking out for them, for whatever reason, then you are no leader at all. You are a very bad manager, and that is because you are recklessly wasting the resources that you are responsible for as a manager. And, well, saying they volunteered to go, well, volunteering to go into harm's way if you yourself are not prepared to do so is no excuse. So to wrap this part up, folks, leaders, use that common sense given to you to ensure that people are not needlessly being put in harm's way or volunteering or voluntold to do something, all because it will look good to the higher ups. And here's a tip for those individuals hell-bent on throwing common sense out the window. Keeping your people safe will always look good to the higher ups. Now let's take a look at this week's leadership concept. This week, I'm talking again about great teams, great leaders, great individuals having laser sharp focus on finishing to completion. Finishing to completion. So you start something, you finish it. There are no prizes for half-assing anything. Hey, I started reading a book. Where's my medal? Hey, I halfway finished this race. Where's my participation trophy? No. Hey, I talked to an astronaut on my shortwave radio, and as a matter of fact, I did. I really did. I recently did speak with an astronaut on the International Space Station, and I have the proof. So, there's a video on that, so it's cool. But what I'm getting at is that was my plan. I always wanted to talk to an astronaut that was in space, so I kept my mouth shut about it until I did something about it, and I did it. Now I can tell people. See, far too many people lack the focus, they lack the maturity, they lack the attitude, the drive, and most of all, they lack the commitment to finish what they started, but yet expect a pat on the back or a prize for just half-assing it. And do you know what you get when you half-ass a relationship? That's right. You get exactly what you deserve. Half of what it is and half of what it should have been and could have been. So before you start pointing fingers, remember, it takes two to tango. It always takes two to tango. Now, let's make this clear and do a little math. Half of anything is 50%. And guess what? You are at least 50% to blame for failing in a relationship, failing to achieve a goal, failing to succeed, for failing to complete something you started. Yes, it's true. At least 50%. Now, let's use a book as an example. A book, right? You went to the bookstore and you saw a book that had an interesting title, interesting cover, so you selected the book. You paid for it, you took it home, you sat down, you read, you're sitting down ready to read the book, and then you crack open the pages and then you determine it's not for you. Whatever reason, doesn't matter, it's not for you. And of course, most people will lay the blame on the author for writing something they either don't understand or they just can't get into. But 100% of the blame does not lie in the book or the author. At least 50% is your fault because yes, you did judge the book by its cover. And of course, I understand who wants to continue reading a book they have no interest in. I get that. But a book, a road race, anything, it's no excuse. You did it. And the same thing with personal and professional relationships or both. And I hope you get what I'm alluding to with this, that it is part of your fault. You are part to blame. So if you want to be a great leader, a great individual, then you have to be prepared to commit to finishing what you started. And there can be no backing out or just putting in the bare minimum. That doesn't work either. See, to achieve greatness, you have to go all in all the time. To be great, you have to constantly and consistently go in all the time. But stop half-assing everything you do. Stop half-assing everything you say. You have to stop half-assing your relationships. Go all in or walk away. Because while maybe you want to believe you have it in you to be great, and you continue to quit, you continue to give up, you continue to half-ass everything, well then I can honestly say you are only fooling yourself because you don't have it in you. See, everyone else will clearly see what you refuse to see about yourself. But when you finally see it, then the time has come for you to make the change. The change that you need to be great. the change you need, that means you must stop kidding yourself. That means you have to dedicate yourself for yourself to go the distance 100%, non-negotiable. So before you start with the BS of, well, I read a book cover to cover, but that's not going to make you great. That's not going to make you great. It will never make you great just reading a book cover to cover. It's great that, yes, you did read a book, but what are you doing to become a great leader? What are you doing to become a great individual? What are you taking out of those books that you're reading? If you're not taking anything out of it, then, again, what are you doing to make your descendants look back into their history and say, our family had great leaders starting with, and you need to work on being great today so that your descendants can put your name at the end of that sentence. Otherwise, I promise you, they're going to put someone else's name. So remember, always start to finish and finish to completion. And folks, on that note, I want to thank you for watching this week's episode. I'm Dave Guerra, and I want to invite you to come back for next week's episode of The Weekly Leader. And hey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode so that everybody joins in on the fun. Have a good one. We'll talk to you next time.